Welcome to Your Success Podcast. We give you actionable insight and stories behind real-life success wherever you go.
Welcome to Your Success Podcast. I'm here today with Cindy Wilcocks.
Hello.
I'm really pleased that you're here today, Cindy.
It's great. Thanks for having me.
So Cindy is a specialist in mental health. You've been a mental health nurse for 20 years, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
You also own a couple of businesses.
I do.
And you're also the author of this fantastic book, Draw a Heart Around It, which is a framework for creating a life, a great life around the love leadership principle, which we're going to talk about in a minute. So today's podcast is about mental health and just trying to become the best version of yourself, I guess, through removing the negativity and replacing it with positive things and love, to try and get the very best out of yourself and your family, etc., etc. So life is hard, Cindy, right? It is hard sometimes, whether you're working, whether you're self-employed or whatever you're doing. Life comes along and just kicks you in the balls again and again.
It does.
And
I wrote a book about it.
Yeah, and as much as we try and be positive, there are days, weeks, months, whatever it may be, where it just feels that nothing is going your way, and for some people that can really affect them quite badly. So can you just very quickly talk to us about what love leadership is, and then that will lead us nicely on to looking more specifically about mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you kind of mentioned, everyone, mental health is a big thing. Everyone's got mental health and everyone's got physical health. And sometimes people get confused about that. So I always start off by saying, everyone's got both, and it's how you look after it and how you take care of it. So when I was thinking about how kind of people's journeys develop and how I've helped people over time with different things during my nursing career and during other jobs that I've had in leadership, I started to think about how I'd actually travelled my own journey, and that's where love leadership got created. So I started to think about what were the key principles. So love leadership is about conducting yourself as a leader of you. And I think sometimes we might forget that as people. We might forget that actually we are responsible for what happens to us and we can shape our future. And I think sometimes when things aren't going so well, it doesn't always feel like that. So love leadership is very much about conducting yourself as a leader of you. And then once you establish that, then you can be a leader of other people. So love leadership is based on principles of love, integrity, openness, honesty, which are things that are very important to me. It's what I stand for. And it's an acronym as well. So the acronym of LOVE, which is L is listen, O is own, V is voice, and E is empower. So I talk about that as the framework, really. So
playing devil's advocate slightly here, Cindy, if someone listening to this, they're travelling along in their car going, this like fuddy-duddy, lovey, hippie stuff, love and all this kind of stuff. But it's based on actual hard, proven principles, isn't it? As opposed to just
absolutely.
A theoretical, just hippie kind of things, right?
Well, I never really knew that I was so in love with love. It's something that's developed in me as, I've kind of got older and wiser, maybe, I don't know. And I think we don't talk about it enough. So what's quite strange is being a nurse and working in the caring profession, you would think that was an automatic thing that was there. And I think it is in the job, in the clinical aspects, but I think what happens within the systems and the processes is we forget about compassion, we forget about love, we forget that the people working in these services are people with families and lives and challenges and good bits. And I think what I really recognised is that I wanted to try and remind people that what's true is that if you approach something with love and kindness, then it makes everything possible. And, there's some kind of old sayings like a problem shared is a problem halved. That's one of the things. And I think that's true. If there's something that I found challenging in my life and then I've gone on to talk about it, actually just talking to someone about it that cares or that loves me or that shows love can actually make that feel better. And then sometimes that's just enough. Yeah. So I think it is based on proven fact, because as human beings, as I stand, in myself or as you stand in yourself, we know that those experiences that we have can be shaped by how other people support us too. So it kind of is. I am a bit of a hippie, to be fair. I won't deny that. But what I really want to do is I want to bring back love into the world. And I put a post up earlier in the week saying, like, come on, more love, less hate, because I think love is something that's so crucial. And I think when you get task focused or target focused, sometimes you can forget the kind of compassion.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very difficult to train someone in the art of love and compassion, right? It's, it's all scientific, it's all procedural, it's all, that kind of area, this red area, falls very much outside of the grey training, right?
Yeah, it's really challenging actually. So in terms of, for men, I think, to talk about this stuff. So I remember when I was getting the book cover designed and I kind of put a few ideas out and people were saying, some men were kind of saying, like, it might be, it's about love. It's a woman's book. And that was really interesting feedback. So I had to really think hard about that when I was designing the cover, that I didn't want it to be seen as a romance novel, draw a heart around it. It's about love leadership, because I didn't want it to get confused. I wanted it to appeal to men and women. And I think men are definitely the harder target audience to engage with. But actually I had a conversation only earlier in the week or at the weekend with someone I know who I didn't know. I met him for the first time and I was talking about love leadership, and he said to me, actually, I'm going to go and buy your book and I'm actually going to read it, because he felt engaged.
What's interesting is that my professional investment group, so it's a monthly network meeting, talking about property and personal development in business, and every month we have a personal development speaker, because it's really important to make sure that you're engaged, because you can learn as much as you can learn about strategies and property and all this kind of stuff, but unless your mind's truly engaged and you're in sync with your heart, then there's no point knowing it, because you're probably not going to achieve a lot.
Absolutely.
And what I find, just based on what you've just said, is that the women in the audience, they tend to get it, they understand it, it's natural to them. But the men tend to be a little bit more resilient to it. But what I find is that sometimes the hardest people, once they accept it and they start listening and they open themselves up, they're absolute converts. They get it.
Yeah.
And so I find once you just listen to it and understand it, it can help you, regardless of the whole, male don't quite get it. It's not true at all. It's just needs a little bit more encouragement.
It just takes a different approach, doesn't it? A different approach.
So, love.
Yeah.
But the counterpart to love is hate. And there's a lot of haters out there. And you look at online social media, you look at face-to-face sometimes, and people are very negative about what you do, who you are, etc., etc. Now, we know is normally a reflection of themselves more than anything else. And generally speaking, that we tend to ignore haters because there's no point adding fuel to a fire. But how do you deal with haters? Because you're a very positive person and someone comes along and starts ripping your character or what you do down. Well, how do you deal with that?
It's really interesting, because I think that, there are lovers and there are haters, and I tend to just love them all. And I think that any experience is a good experience, because it's how you use it to help shape you. So again, in the book, I've written about some experiences that people might view as negative, and I try not to do that, because I think it's just unhelpful to me if I could kind of dwell on things and think about them as negative. That's going to have a negative impact on me. So I tend to think, okay, that was an experience. What can I learn from this? How can I move forward? But I think in terms of like lovers and haters, I would describe myself as Marmite. I often do over the years. You either love me or hate me, literally. I'm a very direct person. I do say what I mean. It's always with good intentions. I'm not trying to be critical or blaming or hurt anyone. But if something's happening that I don't like, or if I think that I want to voice my opinion, then I will do that. And I've not always been like that. And now I've stepped into that, I'm not going to change that. So I quite like being who I am. And I think that's the thing. I think the haters, as you describe them, I try and look at it from a place of understanding. I try and step into their shoes and think, like, how is this for them? And it's not that I will change who I am, but I will try and be more understanding about that. I have had people contact me in message form, and I've actually had people contact my daughter about me, which gets a slightly different reaction, more of a protective reaction to my daughter. But I think it's about trying to come from a place of understanding and then ultimately just moving away from that.
Because sometimes they do genuinely have good feedback for you.
Yes, absolutely.
We could go into defensive mode, but actually they do have some good stuff that you can learn and improve, like you said already.
Yeah.
But sometimes they're just a bunch of dickheads, and let's just call it how it is. And we always thank them for their feedback and move on with our lives,
it's
right?
True, yeah, it's true.
I hope I'm not quoted on that one. So moving forward then with mental health, because it is very important.
Yeah.
New year, new body, everyone's down at the gym working on their physical selves, but mental health is quite often neglected.
Yeah.
And I just want to talk to you very quickly, how important is mental health really? Yeah. I mean, we crack on with our lives day to day, we get over things, but it's this thing inside of us that is very important. So can you just explain why it's so important to everyone?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of things have moved on in terms of thinking about mental health in a stigmatising way. So I think there was, if I look back 10 years, I would walk into a room and say, like, who's got mental health? And no one would put their hand up, and they would look at me like I was some kind of alien because, how dare I ask such a personal question in front of everyone? Because automatically people's assumptions would be thinking about mental illness. So they might use words like, kind of depressed, psychotic, and some other kind of stigmatising words to describe mental health. I think over the years, and certainly I tell you who I think's had a big impact on that is the Royals. The stuff that the Royals have been doing around the younger generation, around their charity work in mental health. So Harry, Kate and William in particular, I noticed that they started to come on the scene and talk about mental health in a really public way, which was a surprise for some people, I think. But I think their approach has actually enabled more people to not feel like they can't talk about things. I think with mental health, it's so important because it does affect your function. So as a child, it'll affect your ability to play. As an adult, it'll affect your ability to work. As children and adults, it's going to affect your ability to be able to live life to the full. So I think it is about really noting it and finding out what you need to do to take care of it in the same way you would your physical health. So none of us would have any qualms about thinking, we need to sleep, we need to eat, we need to exercise. Those are kind of common things that are there. I think the challenge is people don't always think about that in their mental health, and they sometimes don't realise how it might impact on the other areas of your life. So
let's say you recognise that perhaps you've had a really bad week or bad month and things are getting a little bit dark in your thoughts and you're not as positive as what you were. What are some quick things that people can do to just recharge themselves, to bring them out of that state?
Yeah. So I talk about, on a very practical sense, things like relaxation shouldn't be underestimated, and mindfulness they're really key things. And
mindfulness is
being in the moment. So I think we spend a lot of time looking at what's happened, worrying about what's going to happen, but actually conditioning yourself, training yourself, practicing, just being in the moment is really important. And in Love Leadership, I talk about listen as the kind of L. And that's about actively listening. So you and I are having a conversation now, you're listening to me, I'm listening to you. It can be a powerful connection when that happens and you're not thinking about the shopping list or whether the light's working or...
Light is working, for God.
or, but you're not occupying your mind.
Yeah.
We're having a conversation and everything else is happening around us. And I think that being in the moment is actually crucial, because if you start worrying about what's happened, it's going to affect you. If you start worrying about what's going to happen, it's going to affect you. I keep saying to people, there is only now. So again, in Love Leadership, I say, stay in the moment, listen to your body. What's your body telling you? What's your mind telling you? And also trying to train yourself to kind of wheedle out the kind of negativity, the voice of blame and criticism and that can actually be quite destructive. So I think that is something that sounds small and takes a little bit of practice. I think the other thing is, in terms of love leadership, the ownership, the own bit of love leadership. And for me, that's about remembering your roots and knowing who you're being in any given conversation. So I think we're all affected by what's happened in our family units, just by life in general, by family culture, by world culture. And it can go back generation upon generation. You know, we might be affected by someone or something that we've never even met or experienced, but it can still be in us. And I think working out patterns of behaviour is really important. So if you're finding yourself in a position where the same thing keeps showing up, it's really useful just to reflect on that and think about how that is and what you would like to be different. For instance, I don't know, if you're in a relationship and, I don't know, the last 3 relationships that you've had start off really well. The first 3 months are great. And then, I don't know, by 6 months you're arguing and finishing, for instance. It might be just useful to think about, okay, so that's happened 3 times. What's happening here? You know, how am I feeling about that? What's showing up here? Like, how am I being affected? You know, have I got some patterns of behaviour that...
Should I have washed those dishes?
Oh no, I should have.
Every time.
But it's a bit like that, and it's really getting to know yourself. And in love leadership, I really think that you've got to learn to love yourself. You've got to learn to love yourself, know who you are, respect yourself, know that you're enough, and then you can build a happy, healthy life. You can build good, solid relationships, and even, you know, people think it's just about individuals, but it affects business productivity. You know, time and time again, I'll go into businesses through my businesses, and I'll see certain areas that might need improving, and actually what needs to happen really is individuals might need some help themselves. And I think sometimes as a society we shy away from getting help, and it's something that I would like us to learn that we need to do really, is that if you need help, ask for it. Getting help isn't a weakness. Getting help's great because you build a community around you that can be really useful.
So if you are feeling really overwhelmed and you've tried centering yourself and being more mindful and it's just not working because so many factors are happening and you know your internal dialogue is just so negative and whatever else, what can people do if they are feeling really overwhelmed? You mentioned about seeking help.
Yeah.
You know, what kind of things can they do?
Well, I always say, again, with the V, have a voice, don't be afraid to use it. Get help, speak to someone, speak to family, speak to friends. And I also put a little caveat in there where I say, like, you don't have to overshare everything. So, you know, sometimes you don't have to, people might feel worried about sharing everything. Sometimes you don't have to share everything. You just need to let people know that you need help or you're not feeling too great. If family and friends aren't as helpful, or if you don't feel that you have that, or it's not making a difference to how you feel, then I think you need to get some professional help, see your GP. So if your mood's low, you know, there's things that you can do. They call it talking therapies, which is obviously the best kind of promotion of support for anxiety and depression. Also, you can have medication. There's medication that's available. There's other things that can help. And I always think that I've got a toolkit and different things suit different people. And sometimes it's talking about it, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's about having medication, sometimes it's not. And it's not one size fits all. So you might hear that someone's been to the GP and they weren't very helpful. Doesn't mean to say that's going to be true for you. So I think it's find your own experience and see what shapes that. Because people respond differently. And I think there's some basics that you can do in terms of mental health, like make sure you're getting enough sleep, make sure you're eating properly, you know, kind of reduce the caffeine, reduce the sugar, you know, no to energy drinks, you know, that kind of physical, what people would consider physical health, can actually help your mental health. So.
So can you give an example of where you've, in your years of experience, where you worked with someone where they weren't necessarily feeling their best, and how you helped them to become a lot better than where they were perhaps in a business environment?
Yeah, I think it's so hard to, like, so when we were talking earlier, like there were all these stories that were kind of coming into my head about people that I've helped over time, and it's a real privilege to be part of someone's journey. I'm thinking about someone right now actually that was in a relationship, and the relationship, let's say, wasn't going as well as it could be. And I think what happened is, because that was the situation, there was a lot of tension at home, which meant the tension came to work. And rather than being someone that spoke about it, and it was someone male, they kind of held it all in. And then what happened is that they appeared to be very abrupt, under pressure, frustrated, not a team player. So it was impacting in their work environment. And what we were able to do really quickly is to establish that actually, when you're communicating with people, they don't know what's going on in your head and in your heart. So sometimes it is about saying to people, I'm not feeling 100% today. I'm sorry if I seem abrupt, or, I'm not thinking straight, or, actually letting people know in your business place that there might be something going on. It could be because, I don't know, maybe you've got a sick relative, or maybe your dog's not very well, but it does affect you. And in this particular situation, it was something that simple, communicating with others that something else was happening, that actually made the difference and made the work environment better. So that was on an individual level. And then on a kind of bigger scale, I do, through one of the businesses, turnaround work for care homes. So where care homes have been inspected by their regulator and then given a grading, I've done a lot of work around going into care homes where they've been inadequate, been put into special measures and faced risk of closure, which you can imagine as a business is very stressful, very serious. And it's very serious for the people living there too and working there. So you can imagine the tenseness in the atmosphere. And what I've been able to do is offer some direction, some leadership, some love, some energy when maybe people haven't had that to be able to put into their business. And I think what that's enabled is people to deal with their own feelings about it and then pull together as a team. And, the good thing is that every care home that we've ever been involved in that have been in a situation like that have done what they needed to do to be able to turn the service around to get a different rating, a better rating, which has been amazing.
That's great, yeah.
Yeah, so it's been great. It's a real, like I say, it's a real privilege to be there, to be genuine, to be real, to do it with heart. I really enjoy it.
Well, it's clear that you love what you do.
Yeah.
So what does success mean to you?
Being happy with who I am. I feel that's successful. I think I look at my daughter and, she's travelling Australia in a camper van with her boyfriend and 2 dogs that she rescued, 2 puppies that she rescued while she was over there.
Very nice.
Success to me is I look at her living her life, and I just feel really proud that I've been able to help skill her so that she can live her best life, because it took me till I was the age of 40 to really know who I was, like who I was, really feel it. I could say that I liked who I was and I knew who I was, and actually I didn't. Success to me is kind of seeing her living her best life and thinking like, great, I've been a contributor in that. So yeah.
That's an awesome definition.
Oh, thank you.
I really like that. All right then, so just to summarise then, Cindy, so if people are experiencing issues, reach out, talk with people, whether it's friends, family, professional help, and just don't let it get on top of you, really, and just let the world know that you need some help, right?
Exactly, yeah. And exactly that. And I think sometimes people find it hard to trust people, maybe through some of their experiences. And I think what you have to try and believe, even though it's hard, is that the world is full of good people. And unfortunately, sometimes what we get to hear about or experience is the things that leave us not believing that. But I think, I've managed to find networks and great people. And I speak to, we were only speaking earlier, and you were saying like you've been interviewed some great people and you've met some really great people. And I think you have to sometimes take a risk and trust the process.
What's interesting is that if you have a look on the BBC, for example, right? So most people when they wake up, they check the news on their phone, on the TV, whatever it is. And if you just skim through like the key headlines, it's like death, murder, strangulation, crisis, whatever it may be. And you think, Christ, you're filling your mind up from literally the minute you wake up with just negativity. And now I just don't even bother. So what's the point? So I look at something a little bit more positive. What interesting stuff have we discovered from a science point of view, a health point of view? And it just fills you up with a lot more positive stuff and a lot more constructive stuff. I don't need to know that some person's been killed around the corner. It's nothing to do with me. Yeah. I'm sorry that it's happened, but it's not something I want to fill my life with. And like you say, a lot of people are influenced quite heavily by this negativity, whether it's on the BBC or whether it's other news sources. So maybe just filtering or reducing that time down.
Totally agree with that. Totally agree. I mean, it's funny, I was saying to you earlier, I was out of the country for 8 months, and before I left, I was in kind of the usual routine, exactly like you say, switching on the telly, the news is just on, and it's just, even if it's in the background, it's there. But since I've been back, and whilst I was away, I obviously wasn't doing that. And it's been great, and I've continued that. I mean, don't get me wrong, I see what's happening on the news, and social media is hard to avoid, and it can be quite useful. But I try and, much like you, think like, what's going on in the world? What do I want to help to create? And actually, I think what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create a world that I want to live in and that I want my daughter to live in, just one step at a time. And I'm trying to recruit people that also want to do that into a community so that we can all spend time creating the world that we want to live in. Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah. So, Cindy, how do people get hold of your book? Is it where can they buy it?
So it's on Amazon. There's an ebook and there is a hardback. I did it in hardback,
which is unusual these days.
It is, yeah.
But it does look cool.
Yeah, so you can get it on Amazon, and there is a Facebook page called Draw a Heart Around It. And also, obviously, the Love Leadership Academy is something that I've set up. So as well as the book, people can actually come and spend a day with me and talk about love leadership and applying love leadership to their lives to make a difference for them. Because sometimes it sounds easy, and sometimes it, maybe in practice it's a bit harder. If it was always that easy, wouldn't we all be different people?
So how do people get in contact with you? Perhaps they've been inspired today by listening to you, or they want to find more information about the Academy.
Yeah, I mean, I am a big fan of social media. So you'll find me, Cindy Wilcocks, on Facebook. You'll find me on LinkedIn, Cindy Wilcocks, and I'm pretty good at getting back to my messages. I'm less good with email. I don't actually have email on my phone anymore, so it was
probably
something
live
else.
A quieter life.
Yeah, so I have to actually sit down in front of my laptop and look at my email, which sometimes I think can be frustrating for people when they want an instant answer, but for me, it works for me. So
what was interesting the other day, I met a really cool guy, owns a bank, right?
Okay.
Really cool. And he said, do you have a business card? I haven't had a business card in donkey's years. I don't use it because people just find me on Facebook. So social media, that is your online digital business card, right?
Yeah.
So I can completely understand.
That's so cool. I'm glad of that.
You're not the only one.
Someone else.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Cindy, really a great chat with you, and it is a really important topic about mental health. And thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's
Brilliant.
great.
So you've heard what our thoughts are on mental health and how people can improve their lives. Perhaps you've had an issue with mental health. Perhaps you would like to share some of your stories. Please get in contact with us at Hello at Your Success Podcast or on all the social media channels. We're everywhere. Thank you again, Cindy.
Thank you very much.
I've been Anglos, and see you again on the next exciting episode of Your Success Podcast.
You have been listening to Your Success Podcast. Click subscribe for more incredible content. More details can be found at www.yoursuccesspodcast.com.